In the last video of this topic, I'm going to talk a little bit about the preferences and settings that might be useful to look into before you actually start working with Illustrator. I already mentioned in the previous video that you can find the preferences if you are using Mac from the Illustrator CC menu, and there you will find preferences and the different categories within that. If you are a PC user, you can go to the edit menu and at the bottom you will find preferences. Or if you have nothing selected, you will also have an option here on the top in the options bar called preferences. Or one additional way, once again if you are a Creative Cloud user, is to click on this rocket icon, which will again open up the preferences. This time it's exactly at the GPU performance tab. But let's focus on the General tab, which is the first category there, which has three very important options straight away. Now these might be different in your case because I already adjusted them, but I would like to show you what these three values mean here. So first of all, we have a keyboard increment. Now let me set this back to, let's say, 2 millimeters. And by the way, the units that you use can be also updated under units. So my general setting is millimeters, but if you prefer to work with inches or pixels or points, you can switch here to whichever you wish to use. But coming back here to general, now my keyboard increment is set to 2 millimeters. Now what does that mean? If I click OK and I select an object like this balloon, I can use the arrow keys on my keyboard to nudge this object around, left and right arrows or up and down arrows like that. And each time it will move 2 millimeters. If I hold down the Shift key, I can nudge by 10 steps at the same time. So that will mean, in my case, 20 millimeters each time I press an arrow while holding down the Shift key. This is extremely useful when you want to just nudge things around. And I actually prefer to keep it quite low. So if I go back to the preferences, I can also use the shortcut, which is Command or Control K. And I can type in either 0.1 or 1 millimeter. I'm just going to keep it at 1 millimeter for now. Now, I won't have time to go through all the settings here, but it's worth going through all these chapters in your own time and find out what each of these settings can do. They are quite self-explanatory, like use precise cursors. If I select that and click OK, whenever I have a tool selected, let's say the eyedropper tool, I will just see a crosshair, so it's a more precise cursor. But if I go back and turn this option off and see how it looks by default, it will show me the eyedropper, with which you will have to remember you need to target to the bottom left corner of that cursor because that's where it's going to pick up the color. So if I click here, it picked up that color and actually already applied it to whatever object I had previously selected. But this is just one of the many options that you can change, and we will come back to some of them. But what I would like to highlight in this video, apart from the options we already went through, would be under the selection and anchor display, where you can see a tolerance value. Now that is set to 3 pixels. If you get 3 pixels close to an anchor point or an object, you will already be able to select it. Now you can increase this to make it wider, the tolerance, or broader, or you can also make it a bit more precise and set it to, let's say, 1 pixel. So let me show you what this means. If I click OK, whenever I use the selection tool, for example, I can go close to a shape and it already allows me to select it. So I don't have to exactly be on it to be able to select it. That might be a useful setting, and again, something that you might want to update. But also in the same area within selection and anchor display in the preferences, you can even change how anchor points and handle points look like. So if you find it difficult to see them, you can always update these settings here. Apart from customizing these preferences, it's also a great way to learn about features in Illustrator or even keyboard shortcuts. Like here we can find the command click to select object behind option, and that's also enabled by default. So that's something you can already put to use. Command click would be control click on PC, but let's just try this out. If I click OK, I can put this anchor, for example, on top of the globe. If I hold down Command or Control on PC and I click, I can select whatever is behind, and then doing the same thing again, I can toggle back and select what is in the foreground. This shortcut, by the way, works in InDesign as well. Again, it's called Select Behind. And even in Photoshop, if you have the Move tool selected and you use the Command or Control key, you can auto-select layers. So my point is, it's worth spending some time exploring the preferences and see what each of the features can do. But don't worry, because throughout this course, we are going to look at several of these settings, and I will explain how changing them can help you in certain cases. And the good news is that with that, we went through all the basic settings and options that I wanted to explain in this chapter. So now the real fun can begin, because in our next chapter, we will learn about working with objects, which is essentially an introduction to how to create things in Adobe Illustrator.